Fancy a weekend away in a spooky old house? You got it. Here are 19 reasons to watch Rose Red. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is the place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Do check out the links in the description to find my Stephen King quiz book, my newsletter, my podcast and some other stuff. But most of all, thanks for checking out this video, particularly checking out this video because this is where we're starting to go really niche and really into the deep cuts. We're still in 2002, we're still covering made for TV stuff, and to be honest, we're still not having that great a time. Yes, we're covering Rose Red, the 3-episode miniseries that Stephen King wrote that starred Nancy Travis, Julian Sands, a bunch of other people as well, and probably has a more interesting story about how it got made than actually the series itself. But we'll get into all of that in good time. Now, if you've not seen Rose Red yet and you're worried about spoilers, don't be. Anything that I say here is one of my reasons to watch it that might ruin a first time watch for you. I will hide behind the spoiler alert, so at that point you can just find the timestamp to the outro and skip ahead so you don't watch anything that might mess up a first time watch for you. Or of course you can just watch the whole way through. Now, if you're wondering where you can watch Rose Red, if you're in the US, you should be able to find it on Hulu. As for the UK or anywhere else, well, it's not on any streaming services, but let's just say I didn't have any difficulty finding it on YouTube. Okay, right, let's crack on. Here are 19 reasons to watch Rose Red. So what's my takeaway reason to watch this? It's a pretty tough task actually, because even though it is pretty watchable, it was made for TV after all, it's too long and it's kind of bland. But it's got an interesting hook, and that hook is that this is Stephen King's homage to The Haunting of Hill House. Now that in itself is a pretty cool idea. So if you're into ghosts, if you're into spooky houses and an ensemble cast, then this could be for you, provided you've got 4.5 hours to spare. Oh, and it also has one of my all-time favourite Stephen King cameos, and we'll get to that after the spoiler alert. So I mentioned this one has an interesting history. I'm going to take a couple of reasons for you to watch this explaining that history because it does add to the appeal and the intrigue of Rose Red. So this began life in Stephen King's mind as a feature film, as a movie. He pitched it to Steven Spielberg in 1996 as a sort of remake of The Haunting, keeping on with the Haunting of Hill House theme there. And Spielberg agreed to work on it with King. They bounced some ideas around together, but ultimately ended up disagreeing. Spielberg wanted more action, King wanted more horror. So eventually they mutually agreed to shelve the project, and Spielberg stepped away and King bought back the rights for it so he could do with it as he wished. So King picked it up again in 1999 and he pitched it to Mick Garris, who declined it. Yeah, Mick Garris turned down a Stephen King project. So, third time's a charm, he pitched it to Mark Carliner, the producer who he'd worked with on Storm of the Century and on the Shining miniseries. And this time it worked. Mark Carliner said yes, and they agreed a plan. And they agreed a plan on the 18th of June 1999, a Friday. And King said that the following Monday he would pick up the script and start going through it and finishing it. But of course, if you know your King history, on Saturday the 19th of June 1999, he went out for a walk in Maine, and well, he got hit by a minivan and his life got put on hold for quite a bit. But actually for King, working on Rose Red really helped with his recovery. He said in interviews that working on it was almost like dope for him. And it was at this point that he switched it from being a movie to a miniseries because he felt the format suited him better. He said he's more of a putter-inner than a taker-outer. And eventually he got Craig R. Baxley on board as director, who he'd worked with on Storm of the Century. And after all these years, after all these attempts from the universe, or maybe the house itself, to not have this story told, filming finally happened, and it took place over 4 months towards the end of 2000. It was finally in the bag. Now, watching this back now, one thing that isn't so great is the CGI, but I'm guessing that of its time, it probably looked okay. It was certainly extensive and expensive. The budget of the CGI was huge, and it took 6 months of post-production to get it all done. Another interesting part of the history of this is how in ABC went on the marketing. They were kind of ahead of their time. They were engaging in stuff that would kind of be termed as viral marketing right now. So along with all their usual advertising, they contracted author Ridley Pearson to write a tie-in novel. So that tie-in novel is The Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, My Life at Rose Red, but that was presented as having been edited by Joyce Reardon, who is the lead character in this miniseries. And this was all to try and build this illusion that Rose Red was real and this diary was a real found artefact. It was kind of found footage almost. And King suggested that they included a note in the foreword to the book saying that a best-selling author in Maine had stumbled across this diary and had used it for some inspiration. And fans generally kind of bought it. This was also helped by a fake website that ABC set up for Beaumont University, which is the university where Joyce Reardon works in the miniseries. So this university website had staff profiles, it had information about Rose Red, about the house, about the history, and again it helped sell this illusion that this thing was actually real and kind of built the hype and the spookiness for it. Pretty clever stuff. So what is the actual hook here then? Well, Rose Red is this spooky old house in Seattle that seemed to have been built on cursed ground, and legend has it makes people disappear or end up dead, and also legend has it that the house just kind of keeps building itself, adding more wings and rooms. And our lead character is Dr. Joyce Reardon, who works at Beaumont University in the psychology department, and she wants to capture some real evidence of supernatural stuff happening in the house because it will make her career and it will get her head of department off her back. So she puts together a team of psychics and they go and spend the weekend in the house. And while the house has been dormant, of course, when they arrive, the house wakes up, and from then on, it all just starts going wrong. So the cast here is large and they're mostly not very good. We've got Nancy Travis in the lead role as Joyce Reardon, who is just kind of annoying and not very convincing. We've got Kimberly J. Brown as Annie Wheaton, who barely has any lines and is just forced to fit into this magical autistic child trope that is really tiresome. And then we've got Melanie Linsky as Annie's sister, Sissy Wheaton, who is passable but still kind of meh. There is a standout pair for me though. We've got Julian Sands as Nick Hardaway, and he's great mainly because he's sarcastic, snotty, sneery, and just a bit of a prick and kind of fun. And he's English, we Brits have got to stick together. And then the other one of the standout pair for me is Matt Ross as Emery Waterman. Emery! Who is this horrendous mouth-breathing twat who you love to hate and is by far and away the standout character in this miniseries. And the way Matt Ross plays him is spot on. He's like Harold Lauder, but like remixed and churned out again in another world. So a special mention to David Dukes for his portrayal of the bad guy head of the psychology department, Professor Carl Miller, partly for his performance, which is good in that you really don't like this character, but also because very sadly he died during the filming of this miniseries. But kind of spookily, the actor died the day before he was going to film his character's death, which again, it all feels like this fictional house not wanting this story to be told. Weird, right? Oh, fun fact for you. So I basically spent all of episode 1 absolutely convinced that the guy playing the campus reporter, Kevin Bollinger, was absolutely Victor Pascal from Pet Sematary, despite that film coming out, more than 10 years earlier. And of course, he isn't played by that guy. Kevin Bollinger is played by Jimmy Simpson, but you have to admit, there is a resemblance. So lastly, before spoilers, I will admit there is something cool here, there is a good idea here, but it's too long and it's too ploddy and we just lose any sense of urgency and everything is just explained and then explained again. Each of these episodes are 90 minutes long. Way too much. Make these 3 episodes 45 minutes each and you've potentially got an absolute banger of a series on your hands. As it is a slog. And it's another one of those ones for the diehards and the completionists. Of course, which I am, and you probably are as well. Say, okay, from this point onwards, I'm going to be sharing some of my favourite moments and potentially showing a few things that, if you've not watched Rose Red yet, you might want to save to experience for yourself first. So consider this your spoiler alert, and if you want to bail here, find the timestamp to the outro, and I will see you before we wrap up. Otherwise, stick around, huddle in, close the doors, because I've got a few more reasons for you to watch Rose Red coming right up.
On with the show.
So technically there's no book on which this is based. Obviously we've got the tie-in novel, but King didn't write that, and there's even a prequel novel to the tie-in novel, which King had no involvement in whatsoever. So there's not really anything to compare here. But I was thinking, like when we talked about Storm of the Century, I talked about how much I would love to see a novel of it. Would I want to see a novel of Rose Red? Not really. No, I've read The Haunting of Hill House, and that delivers on the scares in a page count that's about that thin. Don't need it, thanks. Okay, on to my favourite scenes. Honestly, there weren't that many. But one that did stand out to me was the cool shot where you've got the video camera seemingly filming an empty room, but then you see what's on the screen and it's totally full of ghosts. And if you look closely, there's 19 minutes left on the battery too. However, my favourite scene also combines the Stephen King cameo I mentioned a few reasons ago. When he turns up as the pizza delivery boy.
Got 3 unloaded for Reardon, large, with 2 6-packs of soda.
It's magic. They all start dancing for seemingly no reason whatsoever, and yeah, it's a great time.
Do this often?
Every chance we get. How much?
And yeah, even that is too long. That is emblematic of this miniseries. They take something that's great and then just stretch it out about 25% too much. But even so, I had a good time with that scene.
Hey, this is some place, huh? Is it haunted?
Yeah. There goes the delivery man who asked too many stupid questions and never escaped.
As for my favourite line, well, not many options here. But I'll admit that Nick calling Emery Big Boy did make me laugh.
What do you want, big boy?
So when it comes to connections to other King works, among the cast and crew I've mentioned the fact that the director and the producer previously worked on other stuff with King, and Melanie Lynskey would later go on to be in season 1 of Castle Rock. However, it's when we look at Easter eggs that it becomes a bit busier here. So Annie Wheaton makes rocks rain from the sky, which is just like Carrie. It's also a rip-off of The Haunting of Hill House, but let's say it's like Carrie for the purpose of this. We get this great scene where Emery opens the fridge and everything's covered in blood, which made me think a lot of Danny Torrance. Emery's mum's car's registration plate is 019. We saw the camera with 19 minutes left on the battery, of course. Joyce speaks to someone called Miss Spruce, and that is the maiden name of Tabitha, Stephen King's wife.
Oh, wait, Miss Spruce, isn't it?
Kathy Spruce, that's right.
And that doll that Annie's holding around kind of looks both like Pennywise and the doll from the Stan miniseries in '94, don't you think? Did you spot anything else? Let me know in the comments. Lastly, I don't know how to neatly wrap this up, so I'm going to leave you with 2 more thoughts that are completely disparate from each other, but we're at reason 19, so I'm going to have to cram them in here. First of all, this trip took place over a weekend in May, so why is Annie's dad watching American football in May? That's not football season. And secondly, can we just enjoy Julian Sands being a bit saucy? Yeah. So there we go, 19 reasons for you to watch Rose Red. I mean, far from the greatest, right? But let me know what you think of this miniseries in the comments. Do you have any favourite characters, any favourite moments? Am I being too harsh on it? Get involved, let me know. Also check out the links in the description to find my Stephen King quiz book, newsletter, podcast, bunch of other stuff. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, but most of all, thank you for checking this video out. I really do appreciate it. Hope you had a good time. Next up, well, we're taking a break from our plod through middling TV from 2002 to bring you this month's book special.
You ugly little troll!